Hello and welcome to Consumer Behavior. I'm Dr. Greer yet again, and tonight we're going to be talking about attitudes and influencing attitudes and then self-concept. So these are great chapters. Let's just dive right in. We're down into that internal influences in this framework that we've been working with from the beginning. And we're going to learn even more interesting stuff about our psyches. We're also moving into the middle. So you can see that we went from external, we spent last week on internal, and now we're going to be moving into that self-concept and lifestyle area, which I think is just fascinating, and a lot of students get a lot of wonderful things out of that. We're going to define attitude and its role in consumer behavior, and then we're going to summarize the three components of attitude, and then we're going to go through all the different ways that we can use that when we're developing marketing and how we can have fun with that as marketers and make pretty powerful messaging based on these concepts. So let's just jump right into attitudes. An attitude is an enduring organization of motivational, emotional, perceptual, and cognitive processes with respect to some aspect of our environment. So this guy down here in this image doesn't look too motivated, or he's just chilling from something. His attitude might be a little chillaxed, I would say, but an attitude is an enduring organization of motivational, emotional, perceptual, and cognitive processes with respect to some aspect of our environment. So that's like how we feel, look, and endure about one concept. Whoop. And so when we look at this, we have some kind of stimuli. It's a product, a situation, a retail outlet, a sales personnel, advertising. Something triggers us to be thinking, okay, should I be purchasing this? Now we can have an emotional, a thought version, an emotional response, a thought response, or a physical response. So emotional, like it draws us to do something, like we just feel this welling up of some kind of emotion. We start thinking about something, which or we have this physical aspect, which that manifestation comes out as if you are so excited. In fact, I was watching a show with my daughter the other night. It was a viral video kind of show, and it showed a girl who got directions to One Direction, or I'm sorry, she got a ticket to a One Direction concert and just lost her marbles. She was just screaming and so excited. You know, that's a pretty affective response. It also had a little bit of behavioral going on there. So we can see that there's a position that we take with one of those three pieces that give us our attitude about how we feel about something. Now, there is a self-assessment mannequin, SAM test, that talks about the pleasure, arousal, and dominance. Now, this is something that you can take or give someone, but essentially you just look at these little mannequins, you write, where do I feel right now as it relates to my just baseline feeling? And then you could show someone a product or a service, and then you could actually have them take it again. See, does it help arouse? Does it help them have pleasure or dominance? Like, which one does this do for them? And when we talk about that, our attitude has component consistency. So we have these three pieces, our feelings, our beliefs, and our responses. Those three things combined give us our overall attitude. I always like to say that, or look at it and say, okay, is someone having a positive attitude experience about this, or is it supposed to be negative? We have so many things going on right now where I would say there's a lot of marketing happening based on fear because of the current virus situation in the United States. So you have to just wonder, like, okay, are people feeling scared? Are they believing that they're in danger? And what are they doing because of that? They're buying Purell and toilet paper and all these wonderful things. So, you know, what is that a consistent attitude that they have? That's a question, but it's an overall attitude that a lot of consumers are having right now. Now, factors that can account for inconsistencies is maybe someone doesn't need that. So how many people get excited about toilet paper normally? And yet we see fights breaking out over toilet paper right now. So that could be, you know, there's a lack of need typically because toilet paper is always everywhere. Now when it's getting sparse, people are yelling and screaming and fighting each other for it. There's just all these different ways. Lack of ability, failure to consider relative attitudes, attitude of ambivalence, like I don't even care how I feel about this, weakly held beliefs and affect or emotion, and failure to consider interpersonal influence. So, you know, maybe we aren't thinking about the way that our friends get us to think about this product. These are all things that can affect the inconsistencies of an attitude that we might have about something. So there are 3 basic change strategies that we can deploy, and we can change someone's thinking, we can change someone's emotional component, or we can change the way they behave. And just today in a meeting, I was saying, hey, we can pattern a behavior. We can teach a behavior right now if we do this certain strategy. That's trying to do a change and using the behavior as the component that we're trying to adapt. So when we look at the ELM model here, what we have is 2 routes, I would say, to looking at what happens after someone is exposed to a marketing message. Now, we have a high involvement or a low involvement. And high involvement means they're going to have to get down to the nitty gritty. They're going to want to find out as much as they can about it. Low involvement means I don't want to know. I just want to get it done. Now, I would say right now, current situation, right now happening in the United States, there are a lot of people that probably don't care what kind of toilet paper they have, right? They're just trying to grab toilet paper. There's also a group of people that want to have a complete and proper food storage. And they're probably doing a lot of research, not just going to the store and grabbing stuff off the shelf. They want to know that they have the right things. When we look at that, we can go down to here and say, okay, when it comes to water, there's probably people just buying water bottles. That's probably very low involvement. If they're saying, need water? I don't know if you've noticed, but N95 masks are popping up as advertisements all over the internet right now because they know people are looking for it. And they're pretty much flooding the airwaves because they're making a lot of money as they're selling that stuff. So there's a few core tenets of this actual ELM model. And we're going to talk about part 1. And what you want to do is compare to the attitudes formed under the peripheral route. Attitudes formed under the central route tend to be stronger, more resistant to counter persuasion attempts. They're more accessible from the memory and they're more predictive from behaviors. So we want to make sure that if we can get someone into that central route, which is high involvement, versus the peripheral route, which is low involvement, we can kind of usually keep someone in that frame. Core tenet of the ELM part 2 is that peripheral cues influence persuasion under low involvement, but not under high involvement. If you start putting the high involvement in it, it won't have the same influence. And central cues influence persuasion under high involvement, but not low involvement. So typically, if someone's making a big purchase, they're not just going to go out and get a large purchase. They're going to do a lot of information digging, a lot of research, something that you care about passionately. There are people that buy ties, and there are people that go out and struggle for the exact tie or socks. Now, I would probably argue that socks and ties are under central cues. Under peripheral cues because it's low involvement. Like you might go and pick it out, but you're not studying it typically like the average consumer wouldn't be. But a car is typically a little bit more high involvement, at least in my lifetime. So I would probably say it's more central cues. But there are caveats to this and exceptions to any rule. And so we just want to be aware of that. So one of them can be cue relevance. And so what is that peripheral cue and what's the relevance of that? And an attractive model and her hair may be decision irrelevant in an ad for a car, but the decision relevant in an ad for shampoo. So hair might not mean anything for a car, but it could mean everything for a shampoo. That's a great example of, now, would you want to put an ugly model in a car commercial? I don't know. Like maybe you have a reason to draw attention to get that stimuli. There's a bunch of different reasons and different factors, but you want to be intentional with your peripheral cues and your central cues. So you just want to know, like, what am I trying to do with this and why am I using it right now? Now, there might be a competitive situation where that peripheral cue can influence persuasion under high involvement in a competitive situation when the centralized cues are neutralized. Okay, so you've tried to do all these things, but because everybody's doing them, the peripheral cues become the tiebreaker. I would say that this probably has to do with like beer commercials. A lot of people, they kind of, it's how funny is the commercial or what am I interested in it? Maybe insurance commercials, like, do we really need to know anything beyond I'm going to save 15% if I, take 15 minutes to save 15% at Geico, or that Progressive is going to save you on average $768 in your policy. Like, they focus more on characters and funny things to do because it might be the difference between the peripheral queue and the centralized queue. And there could be some attribute trade-offs across central queues, which engenders decision difficulty when the peripheral queues help to alleviate it. So, there's just different ways to look at that. Now, there are resistances and to this kind of persuasion. Now, I think all of us can say we know when we're being sold to, and we're typically pretty skeptical when that little like that little laser beam goes up or the little flag goes up, like, oh, this is an ad. All of a sudden we kind of like jump back. We're like, okay, I know they're trying to get me. So I know of one example where my wife, she loves going to Costco and watching that Vitamix blender person. I don't know if you've ever seen it. She'll sit there and she knows it's an ad, but she's going to sit there and watch it. We even own a Vitamix and she likes to go watch that. And I'm just like, what are you doing here right now? But she's just fascinated with that. So we can typically tell what's going on right when we see it. And we just want to be aware of that. So when we're resisting an attack, a brand attack, there's discrediting, discounting, and containment. There's 3 types of communication characteristics that we can look at. So we can look at the source characteristics. So we often evaluate on who delivers the message. Now, would Air Jordans be the shoe they were if it wasn't Michael Jordan? And the answer is probably not, because that source, who represents it, is very important. Or appeal characteristics, how the message is communicated. Is it classy? Is it clean? Is it more frenetic? Is it crazy? Like, there's all these different things that we can look at it. And how is the message structured? So, how is it presented? Is it on a public access television show, or is it on a really high slick YouTube video? I just found a new app called Network, and it's an interesting one. I'm looking at it for the future of marketing, but they do like little live streams on like products that they're selling. And so it's kind of interesting the way they build it up, and they've got a lot of these cool things. I'm always looking for the new latest and greatest thing that's going to come out so we can adapt it and see how to use that in marketing. So there's also source credibility. Persuasion is easier when the target market views the message source as highly credible. There's celebrity sources. Who's the person that is actually endorsing this product? And then sponsorship. A lot of times, sometimes you can sponsor the ballpark or something like that. So this is Halle Berry, and celebrity sources are widely used. Now, the effectiveness is enhanced when the marketers match the image of the celebrity with the personality of the product with actual or desired self-concept of the target market. We're going to talk about that self-concept in a minute. But okay, what is this saying? This is a billboard ad showing a celebrity endorsement. Now, it's Halle Berry. She's in a forest. She's got this wild essence, so I kind of see the wild essence and the forest. Her hair is done, but kind of rough. Is this a good ad? I don't know. I'm not the demographic. I'm not going to sit here and take a look at this and be like, oh, I'm going out to get Wild Essence by Halle Berry. But this might actually call to somebody because they might be a Halle Berry fan. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we match the endorser with the product and the target audience. We do this a lot around here. It's like, okay, who could we get to tell this message? And then we start spitballing who it would be. So, you have to look at your target audience, and they have to know who they are, but who they want to be. I think that's really important. We're going to talk about this in the next chapter. But that ideal self-concept is super important, because if they identify, hey, the person that I want to be essentially is the person that is, is behind this product and endorsing it, then all of a sudden they're like, hey, I could get to that level if I needed to. And then is it the product that I want? And the image of the endorser, is that who I want to be? So we look at different appeals. Now, I think these are hilarious. I think that they're fun. I think fear appeals are very interesting. In my marketing, I prefer to make sure I understand a lot of the fear. Now, I don't try to put fear in people, but I like to acknowledge the fear that I believe they already have in their core. So, and not just acknowledge it, but let them know that I understand that this is a fear, and then identify with them why it's remedied if you're buying this product or working with our service or whatever it is. Then there's humorous appeals. I think these can be fun. I think everybody thinks this is like the classic marketing thing where you want to have a funny beer commercial or a really funny Super Bowl commercial. But it's hard to do, and I think it takes a lot of time and effort to make sure you hit the mark, that you're not being offensive, that you're not being dismissive. There's just some pretty good ways to do that. I think I told everybody last week in my class that one of my favorite commercials of all time is the Geico raccoon commercial. I laugh at it when when they're sitting there eating the trash. He's like, "You got to try this." They go back and forth. He's like, "It tastes like mango chutney and burnt hair." Just makes me laugh every single time. It's humorous. I would have never thought of that. Like, I laugh at it because I'm like, man, someone was brilliant. They came up with that. When we compare ads back and forth, like compare this to that, or an emotional appeal. I saw an ad the other day for Wounded Warriors. And, you're sitting there, you're trying not to cry because it's a bunch of soldiers who've been hurt in battle, and they're just saying, it's only $19 a month. Help us out. And then we have value expressive versus utilitarian appeal. So, like, is this what you want to be? There was a great article that just came out today about and this kind of fits to value and utilitarian, but it was a Lexus dealer saying, you had your fun with a Tesla, now try no compromises on your car. Very interesting. I thought that was great play there, because it's like, hey, we know you've been trying to save the planet, but now don't compromise on your vehicle. Come get the best car in the world, is essentially what they're saying. So it's interesting to see how we can have different appeals. Now, our appeal characteristics are value expressive versus utilitarian. Value expressive attempt to build a personality for the product or create an image for the product user. Much like a Tesla driver is conscientious of the environment, they're still classy. A utilitarian appeal involves informing the consumer of one or more functional benefits that are important to the target market. Like, this car doesn't have to be charged, or this car does get charged because it's an all-electric car. So there's different ways that we can look at that. Now, there's also 3 methods of structuring these characteristics. So I would really recommend you dive deep into this section of the book right here, because this is really key to how you structure a message. Now, I think storytelling is very important. I talk about framing constantly at work. So when we look at, is there one story or one side that we're telling, or are there 2 sides to that we're telling? Like, it depends what you want to use. But these are really, really powerful pieces here. Positive versus negative framing. Is the product you're going to be putting, are you trying to put everything in the negative, or are you trying to have a very positive outlook? That's very important, and it's weird when you go back and forth. And then nonverbal components. What are you doing to back up what you're saying in your imagery? I think that's a very big one also. So let's just look at positive versus negative framing. In an attribute framing, only a single attribute is the focus of the frame. For example, describing beef is either 80% fat-free, which is positive, or 20% fat, which is negative. You see the difference there? So we can say, here's an attribute, and we have 80% of it is fat-free. And you're like, oh, that's really good. That's positive. Right now, if you want to buy hand sanitizer to protect yourself, you need to get, I think it's 62 or 64% alcohol content in that. So if you bought a hand sanitizer and had 50, it doesn't really meet what the CDC is saying. You could frame that as 50% of this is non-alcohol and more natural. So that would be an interesting way of framing that, but you could do that. Or goal framing, so you could have the message stresses either positive aspect of performing an act or a negative aspect of not performing the act. For example, having a yearly mammogram. So we could talk about the benefits of having that mammogram, or we could talk about the risks of not having it. You see how that works? Like, we have that like changes the message, and it can be very important. And I think it's very important that some people might say they always want to do positive. I don't know if that's always the answer. I actually think there's times to talk about the risks, and there's times to talk about the benefits. But when we get into nonverbal components, we can have what pictures they are, what music, and like what are we trying to get them to do. I just created a trailer for doTERRA, and it was talking about one of our current digital products that we have coming out. And the interesting part of that was that we wrote like 50 versions of it. And I finally just said, look, here's my top 3 favorite that I like. I want you to print them out and put each paragraph next to it. And I was like, I like this paragraph here. I want this paragraph here. I was taking it from the different ones because each one had a different frame. And we realized like the first version, let's just say, it was all emotional. It didn't have any information. The second one was all information, had no emotion. And the third one kind of had both, but it was in the wrong order. So when we put it all together, we could take pieces and compile a good piece of copy that was then able to be used as a script, as a dialogue box on a website. But it kind of hit all of those things, and it had the nonverbal cues of imagery, and the music was really intense instead of just being... in fact, I had previewed this to a couple people, and I played it when it was in audio form only because we built the audio soundtrack, which was the voiceover and the music ahead of time. And I actually showed it to about 10 people, and they're all like, yeah, it's okay. Like, it's okay. And then what we did was we built all the video. We then showed it to the same group of people, and everybody was like, that was amazing. You changed so much. And it was just phenomenal how you tied that all together. I mean, you must have worked on that script over and over and over again because it was so good. Little secret, it was the exact same file. Okay, all we did was add the imagery, the pictures. We had already had the music and the words, but the pictures changed everybody's attitude about what that was. So that's kind of interesting. So that's chapter 11, attitudes and influencing attitudes. I'm going to jump into chapter 12. Dun, 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 dun. Self-concept and lifestyle. So we're going right to the heart of this framework. And in this framework, or in this chapter, we're going to talk about self-concept, how it's measured, and how it can be used to position products. Then we're going to define lifestyle and how self-concept and psychographics work together. And we're going to go through Vals. We'll touch on Prism. You can read about that. I'm going to touch more on Vals right here because I think I use that one at work. I think it's a very good framework. So once again, we're going to be learning concepts, but I think this book every once in a while just delivers you a golden nugget, and it's like, hey, take this and use it. That's the Vals part of this chapter here. And actually, table 12-1. So just set the stage here for a second. We all think of ourselves a certain way. And we have two different ways that we see ourselves, and then two different ways that we see each of those selves. The first thing is we have our private self. And this is, our actual self-concept is like how I actually view me as a person. Then we have our ideal self-concept. It's like how I would like to see myself. So it's like where I am, but where I want to be. Okay. Then we have our social self, the way we are viewed outside. So how others actually see me. And then we have our social self, which is how I would like others to see me. Now, I think a lot of times we think that's the part that kind of gets us, is how do I want others to see me? So when we look at independent and interdependent self-concepts, individuals with an independent self-concept tend to be individualistic, egocentric, autonomous, self-reliant, and self-contained. Individuals with an interdependent self-concept tend to be obedient, sociocentric, holistic, connected, and relation-oriented. Now, I love when we're in a live class going to everybody and saying, where do you fit? And it's so funny because they think that there's autonomous is a positive word, but so is connected and relation-oriented. Reliant is a positive word, but some people don't think obedient or sociocentric or individualistic or egocentric are. So this is the funny part. People want to pick and choose parts of it. I always think that's fun. So our possessions, we have our idealized. So we have our actual self, our idealized self, and then we have our possessions. And our possessions create the extended self. So the extended self is all of our possessions, or is the view of ourself plus our possessions. So people tend to define themselves partly by what they have. So I identify with my iPhone, Apple products, right? If someone gets a tattoo is a big culture. Sometimes it's your motorcycle. Sometimes it's your job. Like people, like the things that you have around that. Now, have you ever noticed like mountain bikers all have the same kind of gear, or golfers? Like we'll talk about, hey, what kind of clubs do you have? So it's yourself plus the possession that creates this one. And a peak experience is an experience that surpasses the usual level of intensity, meaningfulness, richness, and produces feelings of joy and self-fulfillment. So if you were a golfer and you were to one day be given, let's just say, a brand new top of the line AP1's Titleist set. Driver, putter, irons, everything. So you had a top of the line thing. And then you went golfing. I can guarantee you're going to feel like, wow, I feel like $1 million. I got to go get some shoes to show that I actually can have these Titleist clubs. You know, like you will build a new version of your extended self, which is pretty powerful. Now, I love to use this when we start looking at who is the person that we're trying to talk to. This 12-2 table is fantastic. So if you want to just go through and say, okay, are these people more submissive or dominating? Are they thrifty or are they indulgent? Are they rational or are they emotional? Are they modest or are they vain? It just helps inform you as a marketer, like where people sit in your demographic that you're trying to go. So when we look at this self-concept, this picture of ourself that we have, we bring our consumer self into it, and then we bring the brand image in. And we say, okay, if I were to be wearing Nikes, interesting story today. Today I was wearing Adidas. I actually took them off before I recorded this. Put on some Nikes. So I have some Odyssey Reacts. I'll take them off because I like to self-identify with my Nike love. There we go. So these are my shoes that I have on right now. But earlier today I was wearing some Adidas. Now I like the Adidas I had on. And my boss actually said, hey, you're not wearing Nikes. What's going on? It was very interesting to me because I was like, oh, wow, he thinks of me as a Nike guy. And I had some really nice Adidas on. They weren't bad. They were just not Nike. So I was trying to, in some ways, I think I inadvertently, because I have some nice black Nikes that I wear all the time, like different versions, but they're all Nikes. I think in some ways I have created an identity with Nike at work. Now, am I happy about that? Sure. At one point, I was looking to get some Cole Haans. Went down, tried them on. I just couldn't find a pair I loved. But I was going to Cole Haan because their soles are made from Nike. So these are all little psyche things. So if I was to say I'm a Reebok guy, I don't know if I am. I'm more of a Nike Adidas guy. And that can be deadly, but it's like, hey, I've found those. It reinforces my self-concept. It's like, okay, I feel good when I wear these. I like Vans, but I actually like Nike skate shoes more, the SBs. And so, but my sister always tells me they're not as trendy. So I only have one pair of those. But I love that. I love those shoes. They're comfortable. I love the tread on them. I don't skate at all, but it's just that kind of style of shoe. I prefer the Nike version. So when we look at the nature of lifestyle, our lifestyle is basically how a person lives. It's how that person enacts his or her self-concept. Have you ever thought, I need to go eat, but there's no way I'm eating at Burger King? No, it's Chick-fil-A today. No Burger King. That is why. It's gross. I would never eat there. It's beneath me. That's your self-concept coming out. So, and it could be determined by your past experiences, your innate current characteristics, or your current situation. I was just laughing the other day. I got a 75-inch TV. I love it, but I saw there's an 86-inch TV, and I want to get it. Why? You know what? These are the crazy things. I don't know. I just want to be able to have an 86-inch TV. It's already almost taking over the wall in my living room, but I'm like, can you imagine 11 more inches of awesome F1 racing, or Ford versus Ferrari, or a Jason Bourne movie? And my wife just thinks I'm nuts. So, but that's kind of what I want to have, and it's the nature of my lifestyle, of what I like to do there. So we have these different ways that lifestyle gets us through this consumer process. So we've talked about all of these demographic, subculture, social class, motives, personality, emotions, values, household life cycle, culture, past experiences. And then it moves into, okay, so what kind of things do we do? What interests do we have? What likes and dislikes? It's really funny. I have preferences on hotels from past experiences. I don't really stay in anything under a 4-star. Now, I'm in a phase in my life where I can afford it, and I can know that I don't have to scrimp on that and feel like I'm in a less than happy environment for myself. So that influences and has an impact on my behaviors. It talks about how I purchase things, when I purchase it, who I go with. So if I was to go, I'm trying to think. So last year I went as a youth leader to a camp to help some youth, and we had to stay in a different location. I stayed at a Days Inn in Moab. It was okay. Wasn't my favorite thing in the world. But I just went back to Moab, took my wife, and I stayed at a really nice Hyatt. It was the best hotel there. That was much nicer. That was much more like my thing. Now, for some reason, I thought, okay, during this week-long excursion with this youth group, I can kind of slum it with the other person I was there with. But when I went with my wife, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to stay at the Days Inn again. And so, it's just an interesting way that we like look at ourselves. And I think the more open we are with ourselves, the more powerful we become as a marketer, because we can actually start identifying these things in ourselves, which helps us relate it to other people. So let's talk about how do we measure a lifestyle. And a lot of people have tried to quantitatively like measure this, and they were originally and initially referred to as psychographics. So it's our attitudes, so some statements that we might make about different things, our values, our activities and interests, what age and group do we belong to? What do we watch? What kind of articles do we read? And then like usage rates, like how often do they use these things? So this is just one of those pieces that we can say, how often does someone golf? Right? I'm into golfing. It's an activity. Would you say that people who golf 5 times a week are in a more refined time of their life? Let's just say that could be the case. Now we have a couple different lifestyle schemes. So let's talk about luxury sports cars. Now, do you drive a luxury sports car? Probably not. Do I? No. Have I wanted to get a vet for a long time? Yeah. My wife and I have argued about that for a long time. Since I moved to Utah, I don't even know if I could have a vet because I'd probably just spin out in the snow. But I really want a Chevy Corvette. I love actually the last version of it. They just had the new version come out. I'd love to have that. The Corvette's amazing. I actually went up to the Utah Auto Show to sit in one of the new Vettes, and they didn't even have it. I was like, why did I even come here? This is the only reason I came here. I want to see this luxury sports car. It was informing myself of this is where I'm going to be at some point. Now, there might be somebody out there who's like, oh, Corvette, peasant food. Will only take Ferrari. And it's like, okay, great. That's your lifestyle. That's where you are. So notice that you can have those kinds of attitudes about that. Now, if you were to tell me that you're on an Android phone, I'll give you that Ferrari look. Oh, peasants, I can't believe you put your Samsung on the table. I'm an Apple person. So there's just different attitudes that we have on these lifestyle schemes. Now, Porsche, consumer segments. So this is based on I believe the Prism effect, the different groups here, Top Guns, Elitists, Proud Patons, Bon Vivants, and Fantastiques. So the Top Guns are ambitious and driven, and this group values power and control and expects to be noticed. So that's the biggest group of people that drive a Porsche. And, so it's like, okay, that's the group that fits in that. In technology, there might be wizards, journeymen, apprentices, and novices. So typically there are different groups that kind of come in and look at, okay, what technology am I going to get? And there's different amounts of people in each one of these. Now, I want to just talk about the 3 general lifestyle schemes, and we're going to focus mostly on Vals. I'm going to just blitz through Prism. I'll probably just show you those, and the Roper Stark Global Lifestyles are okay. But the Vals system to me is something that's really useful. If you were to get a marketing job today or tomorrow, I would take this in and try to look through, if you're selling to adults at least, try to look through this lens because it will give you a lot of information. Now, it's not perfect, and here's the system, but it's a great way to start thinking about it. And the way that you do that, you just say, okay, I'm going to classify the markets that I'm talking to into one of these 8 groups. So Vals essentially talks about how they have, you go from this high resources and a need for high innovation to low resources and low innovation. Now, it tells us that there's 3 primary motivations that someone has: their ideals, their achievement, or their self-expression. Now, I think this is very close to what I said a couple weeks ago, which is people, performance, and process. People want a process or ideal. They want to be able to, have order in the chaos. They want to achieve a result, which is achievement, or they want to have personality. They want to have a connection. And so I think that the way I kind of subscribe to motivation fits perfectly in with Vals, and it's served me well as a marketer. And there's 3 primary consumer motivations. It's ideals, it's achievement, and self-expression. Now, if I was to look at this on this table 12-3, idealists, when they are doing stuff, they are information seeking. They make choices based on principles. They buy functionality and reliability. They seek understanding. They pursue self-development. They resist impulse. And they ask, what should I do? Now, when we look at this, that is the group in the far left. Now, there's a high resources person and there's a low resources person. So there's thinkers and believers. So we can have all those same attitudes, but just say this person has high resources and high innovation ability, and this person does not. So it gives you kind of like 3 categories. It's more like 4 because you have the innovators and the survivors. But you have 4 categories, and it kind of gives you both versions of that category, the high and the low, which is what I like. And it helps you really define some stuff. So when we look at achievement-oriented, they are goal-oriented. They make choices to enhance position. They buy success symbols. They seek social approval. They pursue self-improvement. They resist risk. And they ask, what are others like me doing? They really want to know that. And then finally, for self-expression, they are spontaneous. They make choices to have emotional impact. They buy experiences. They seek adventure, excitement, and novelty. They pursue self-reliance. They resist authority, and they ask, what do I feel like doing? Okay. So it would be very interesting if you could figure out which one of these you are. Okay. I think my primary motivation, this is a tough one, because I feel like I'm part of all of them, right? I'd probably say that I think I'm really spontaneous, though. This is my problem. I think I'm probably more in the achievement self-expression group, but I like to think that I have great self-development and understanding, and I like to think all that. But if I had to choose, I think I'd probably go with... you're going to make me pick self-expression over achievement, but it would be very small. So I like... I like to ask that question, what do I feel like doing when I'm purchasing and stuff like that. So that's basically the Vals system. If we look at the Prism Group, Geo Lifestyle Analysts, the underlying logic is that people with similar cultural backgrounds, means, and perspectives naturally gravitate towards one another. So this puts them into groups. Prism says, okay, we could have 66 different individual segments, social and lifestyle groups. We'd say, did you grow up in a major city, suburban, second city, town, or rural? Okay, that puts you into a group. There's 3 major life stage groups. Younger years, people under 35, family life, households with children living at home, and mature years, which is singles and couples aged 55 and older, or 45 to 64 without children at the home. That's going to be me very soon. I'm really excited. And then, so they put these groups into these names. And, blue blood estates, big fish, small pond, pools and patios. I mean, it's okay. I'm not in love with it. It's really cutesy, but it is a lot more specific. So I'm not telling you it's bad. It's just not what I use. And then global lifestyle segments identified by Roper Stark Worldwide. Same type of thing. They have these groups that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them that they say, okay, these are the kinds of people that typically we're going to see. And all 3 of these are just ways of shortcutting how to get to your market. Okay, that's what I want you to know. So whichever one you pick to use, there's other ones besides these, but you could pick any of these and it helps you really kind of hone in and start crafting your message. And I hope that you'll sit there for a minute, read through the chapter, and try to figure out who you are as a self-concept, who you think you are and where you are in your lifestyle. A lot of people when they're in college, they want to have their parents' lifestyle and they kind of have a self-concept that they belong in the same group that their parents are in. It's typically not true because your parents weren't in that group when they were your age. And so it's just an interesting coming of age story that I think always happens in college. And it's really fun to discuss in class. So I'm sad that we can't do that in class, but I'm sure we'll have a great discussion when we get to meet each other. So that's it for this week. I hope everything's going all right. I hope you're being safe. I hope you're washing your hands and you're taking care of yourself, not doing anything stupid to contract any viruses or anything like that. I hope everything goes well for you, and thank you so much for what you're doing, and I will talk to you later. Thank you very much.